get involved with musical theater growing up?
Oh my gosh. It's funny, actually. I'm from Vermont. I'm from the town of Morrisville, Vermont, which is near Stowe, but it's really not near much else. It's a really small town.
Mhm.
Um, and nobody in my family does theater or is even really in the arts at all. But from a really young age, I was interested in it for whatever reason. I loved Disney movie musicals growing up. um, I wanted to do community theater. My mom used to do business trips to New York City, so she would take me with her, and she brought me to my first Broadway show, which was Beauty and the Beast. And then soon after, I saw Les Mis, and it just like I caught the bug. I guess I just like knew really early on that I wanted to perform and specifically do musical theater. So I just tried to find all the opportunities near me that I could. Like I said, I did community theater. I did our school shows. There were a few there was a voice teacher near me who I started studying with, and I had a great dance company I took dance lessons with. And throughout that, I kind of like connected with all the musical theater people in Vermont. There's not a ton of us, but we all seem to find each other. So I made some of my best friends that way growing up, including Shayna Taub, who is amazing and now thriving in this industry as well as a few others. So we all were like a little community amongst ourselves in Vermont. And I knew really early on that I wanted to go to NYU. I wanted to be in New York City and study musical theater. So I applied early decision and was accepted to what was then Cap 21, the musical theater conservatory in NYU. And so then I studied it in college, and that was sort of my segue into the professional world. But that's how it all began for me.
When you made your Broadway debut in Mamma Mia, what was it like debuting in the show after, I know you toured in the production for a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah, I did the tour right out of college for a year and a half. So I had already had some experience as Sophie. I really knew the show well. So in that way, it was an easy transition. But my dream as a kid was to be on Broadway. I wanted to be on Broadway my whole childhood. So there was a whole new element that was really special, especially my debut night. It did feel totally new and really exciting, and like I had achieved something that I always wanted my whole life. I had a lot of my family there. Yeah, it was just really exciting. I felt I don't know. I think I wasn't very nervous. I was just like very, very excited to be there. Um, and I had a blast. I loved the show. I loved the role. My family was there. They all had fun. So it was a really special night, and definitely one I'll never forget.
You joined the company of Newsies and you started with ensemble and understudying the role of Catherine and then went to perform her full time. What was it like transitioning over to understudy to full time?
Yeah, that was so just I was so happy to join the cast of Newsies in general. I hadn't seen the show, and then I went to see it really when I heard that they were looking for a girl replacement in the ensemble, and I loved it so much, and I specifically loved the role of Catherine. I was like, oh my god, if I even get to play this a couple times as an understudy, I'll be thrilled. So when I got the show, I was so excited. The company was so amazing. We really were like a family. So many of the Newsies were so young, and we were just like, yeah, we were a family. So I had an amazing time in the ensemble understudying. And then when I found out I was going to take over, oh my gosh, I felt really lucky and so excited. Cara Lindsay, who originated it, I was so lucky to get to work with her for a year before, and she just leads by example. She was so brilliant in the role, and I got to watch and learn a lot from her on, how to be a leading lady on and off stage. So I'm really thankful for her in that when I took over, I felt like I I was honored to be filling her shoes. And yeah, I was so excited. And it was nice to kind of feel like I had a year to be like one of the guys first, to like really get to know everyone and have that camaraderie, and then take over as Katherine. So I felt at home. I had done the role before, as an understudy. So I was excited. It was great. I just felt really, really lucky to be able to do that full time.
What was it like? You were in the closing company at that point. So what was like saying goodbye to the show, being a part of the final performance?
Absolutely wild. I will, the closing was a shock for us. We weren't expecting it. So when we got that news, it was a really devastating day. I was like, that was my first time being part of a closing show. So I was just like, oh my gosh, doubled over with the news. But we luckily had like several months notice. So we got to really savor those last few months. And the closing show it was wild. I have so many videos backstage from that performance of like when I was off stage, we have monitors that you can hear the show and the audience. And it was just like minutes of screaming and applause after every number. And I was just like standing there videoing the speakers. Like, it was just so overwhelming, and you knew that it was so special because it was the last time we were doing this on Broadway. So I was just like trying so hard to be present and like soak it up, but it was totally overwhelming. And then as soon as the show finished, we were all like crying and hugging and then celebrating. It was wild. It was a wild experience.
So you've also done several readings and workshops for new musicals like Devil Wears Prada. What's your favorite part about being a part of early stages of musicals?
Oh my gosh. Well, Devil Wears Prada was the first time I had done the very first reading in 2019, and I was with it all the way through the out of town this past summer. And that was my first time being attached to a show from like, the very beginning through its journey of a fully staged production. So I was just really like enjoying every bit of that process because it's wildly different than what I had mostly done before, which is replace in an existing show. I would replace a role that already exists. It was interesting. I learned so much about, what it takes to make a musical work. It was just really fascinating to go from, envisioning it for so many years at our binders and trying to envision what everything would look like, to actually seeing how to mount a show to go from the page to the stage. And all the bumps along the way, like seeing how many things didn't work out and how to fix them. And mostly it gave me a huge appreciation for how much it takes to make a musical happen, like the years and years behind a show you might go to see on Broadway, like the years it takes to work out all the kinks and develop the script and the music and get it onto the stage and figure out the tech element. Like it's so difficult. So it gave me a huge appreciation for that. And I was like along for the ride, learning as I went. It was a really cool experience.
And as we mentioned earlier, you're newly announced to be in Back to the Future, opening later this year. What was the whole audition process like for that show?
Oh my gosh, it was kind of crazy. I haven't like gotten to talk about it yet, so this is like my first time speaking of it. I'm like, am I allowed to? I am. So I got my first audition for that right after I closed Devil Wears Prada. I was still in Chicago, and I was supposed to fly home, I think in a week, and my agent called with the audition. And I remember at the time I was so exhausted because we had just closed, but I was like, oh, I really need to go in for this. Like, I love this. This is so special. I felt like I connected to it right away. So I changed my flight, flew back early. So my first audition was August of 2022. And then from August through like the end of November, I went in 5 times. So it was a long process. I went in initially in August, then I went back in the next day, and then they were like, great, we'll see you again for final callbacks in November. So I really just had to like compartmentalize it for several months. But it was always this thing that was like, okay, this is coming. Now we're down to 1 month. Now we're down to 2 months. So it was interesting. I had to really like put it away, but then also touch back on it from time to time to keep it fresh. And then I went in November for music work session, final callback, and then a final callback. So yeah, it was a long process, but one I just like felt in my gut from the beginning that like it was a good fit and I loved it and I wanted it so badly. So every time I got called back in, I was like, okay, yes, let's do it again. Yeah, it's wild.
And what are you most excited for fans to see for the show?
Oh my gosh. Well, I have no idea what it's going to be like yet because I have not seen the show and this is a brand new show. So this will be one of those experiences where we're just like creating it as we go. But so I'm just really excited from what I have seen, like bits and pieces and what I got to do in the audition room. I just think it's going to be a really fun, exciting musical version of the movie that we all love and a lot of us grew up on. Like, I think it's just going to be really exciting and really fun and a great adaptation of the movie. That's what I think. But we'll
And what show or role has had the biggest impact on you?
Oh my gosh, that's so interesting. I think definitely one of the shows that I did like as a kid, I think it might be Gypsy. I did a community theater production of Gypsy in Vermont with my friend Shayna and like all my Vermont musical theater people. I think I don't know, I forget how old I was, maybe 10, maybe 12. But I fell in love with that musical. I love that musical. It's to this day, it's like one of my favorite shows ever. And I love the role of Louise. That's still one of my dream roles. I would love to play her. I just think like the story, the characters, the music, it really was kind of like a piece of the puzzle for me that really sealed the deal in making me fall in love with musical theater. And I remember as a little like kid, I played a newsboy and they made me like chop my hair because they didn't use wigs. It's a nightmare. But I remember being a little newsboy like extra, extra, and looking at Louise and like I wanted to play her so badly and I loved all her music. So yeah, I think that had a really big impact on me and it continues to. Every production I see, I just like am always like blown away by the women who play those roles. And yeah, I love the show.
During that time of being introduced to musical theater and being in those shows, was there a teacher or a mentor that also impacted you and made you sort of into the performer you are today?
Yeah, I have had, I think, several along the way at different stages of my life. I think because not a lot of people in the town where I'm from are interested in musical theater. A lot of teachers, music teachers, drama teachers, dance teachers that I had kind of spotted that in me. So I felt like the arts teachers that I had growing up kind of saw that in me and took me under their wing and tried to encourage me as much as possible, which I really appreciated because it does feel like it felt like for me growing up in a really small town, like the path from there to where I wanted to be was so, far off. I kind of was like, I have this dream, but how am I ever going to make that happen? Like, it just didn't seem possible. I didn't have an example of many people from Vermont who had done that before. But those teachers had a big impact on me. Yeah, my first music teacher, and then my drama teacher in high school, Mrs. Brown, Rebecca Brown, she definitely saw that in me, and we did this like amazing 3-woman 1-act play my freshman year of high school, and we went to the 1-act festival, and it was like we got really far and we won all these awards, and it was the first time my high school had a success like that. We had this amazing cast, so she really like encouraged me. My dance teacher, Helena Sullivan, she's an amazing dancer, dance teacher. I was like an okay dancer, but she really saw like the theatricality in me, so she always really encouraged that and gave me opportunities to storytell when we did any sort of dance number. And then when I got to school, I mean, I had a lot of great teachers, but one teacher that always remembers, her name is Kate Guyton. And again, I just felt like this mentorship from her. She kind of like helped me along the way of going through college and trying to find an agent and the transition and all that.
You've done work both on stage and screen. What is your favorite part of being able to work both sides of entertainment?
Oh man, they're very different. And I'm newer to working on screen. I've only gotten into that in the last like few years, but so that's been so interesting to see just how different working on camera is to working in live theater. It feels like a totally different job. So I love both. And I love that they're so different. And once I started doing more on camera stuff, I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. It feels like it's the same skill set, but very different, like very different mode of storytelling. The whole rehearsal process is so different. Like, and I remember the first thing I did on camera, I was obsessed with comparing. Like, I was like, oh my God, it's so interesting because like in a live show, there's all this buildup. And then when you're on the journey, like you are on the journey and there's adrenaline and feedback from a live audience. And when you're filming something, like it felt very casual to me. Like we were all just hanging around and then all of a sudden they'd be like rolling. And I was like, oh my God, I guess I'm going now. And then we'd cut. And then I was also taken aback by how many takes of every shot they get. Like, you might do a teeny little scene 30 times and it has to be fresh and ready to go every time. So I was like, wow, this is exercising a really different skill set, but it felt good. It feels like a challenge and I like to be challenged. So I really enjoy both. Yeah.
You also teach master classes and have worked with kids of all ages. What is the best part, the most rewarding part about being able to teach sort of the next generation of performers?
Oh man. Yeah, I love to teach. I teach a lot right now. I'm doing a lot of like improv theater game workshops with school groups from out of town for a few different companies. And I really love it because, I think back to my own experience growing up and my parents were so great. They really sought out like every opportunity that there was available around us. But if I had, if I feel like if programs like this had existed when I was a kid, it would have been amazing to get to work with people who do it professionally and get some insight and learn from them. So I just really I love being a part of being able to do that with kids and share what I've learned from this business and what I'm continuing to learn and pass along any advice that I wish I had had as a kid. And I also just love seeing how, kids are evolving and kids in the arts are evolving and how much more is available than there was. And I just think it's really important. Yeah, also from my small town, like the arts weren't always valued in our school systems. So to be able to be a part of educating kids specifically in the arts feels really gratifying for me.
What is the most rewarding part about what you get to do?
Oh my gosh. Honestly, a lot. This business is really hard. And we could talk for hours about how it's so hard and all the difficult things about it. But at the end of the day, like sometimes I'll be going to an audition and it'll just hit me, like, because there's a lot of stress with auditioning and a lot of what we do is stressful. But sometimes it really does hit me like I'm about to walk into a room and kind of like share my soul with a group of people. And that's my job. I'm showing them my heart. I'm sharing a story with them. I'm showing them my soul. I'm like bearing my soul for them. And that's pretty cool to get to do that for a living. Also, when we tell stories on stage, hopefully we're inspiring people, we're connecting with people, people can relate, see themselves in us, and to be able to connect with people after shows and hear that sort of feedback is, it's just, there's nothing else like it. It feels like pretty magical.
When you get to go and tour with these musicals, What's it like being able to see the different reactions from the different cities that you get to perform in?
It's cool. It's fascinating. One of the best things about live theater is that it's live and the audience is sort of a character in the show. So one of the most exciting things is how the audience changes from night to night. And we'll talk about it all the time backstage of like, oh, isn't it interesting that last night the audience was roaring with laughter at this one part and tonight they were so quiet, and what do you think that means? How are they listening differently than they were listening last night? So to do that and do that geographically too is really cool. Like, oh, the audiences in Iowa loved this one part or felt like they related to this character, but isn't it interesting that in Atlanta it felt different, you know? It's just like another cool part of the job, like, you know, experiencing how a show is received and that character of the audience and how they, you know, feed into it and respond is fun.
Have you ever had an experience, whether at stage door, meeting fans that has really like, stuck with you?
Oh yeah. I mean, countless over the years. It's yeah, it's like it's moments like those, getting to meet young people who have the same dream, or you know, I've met people with serious illnesses who loved a show and got to experience it, and they may not have been able to. It's just there's been so many experiences like that over the years, and that's another thing that just kind of stops me in my tracks and makes me feel really lucky. Like this is a part of my job, and so yeah, I mean, too many to count. Honestly, it's a really special part of the job as well.
The last question I like to ask all my guests is, what is a piece of advice you would give to future performers?
Oh my gosh. Let's see. I always like to say, you know, I personally felt, and I know a lot of us feel very overwhelmed in this business of trying to figure out who we need to be on any given day. Like I'm auditioning for this. What do I need to be today? And who do I need to be tomorrow? And what are they looking for? And trying to like make ourselves into a chameleon to be what people want us to be. But I think whenever I have really tapped into me for, you know, an audition, a role, that's when we kind of shine the most. So I always say, even though it feels like everyone wants us to be a million different things, the more we can figure out who we are and figure out how to let that shine through in whatever we do, the more we stand out. You know, if it's auditioning for a role, like bringing what you have to that role that nobody else has, instead of thinking, what are they wanting me to see? Like, what can I put on? And instead going deep inside and saying, how do I connect to this role? What does this bring up in me? What do I have to offer that no one else does? What are the unique ways that I can bring myself to this material? I think the more we do that, the more we stand out, the more we shine through. People are drawn to that. So I would say that even though it feels like we just need to be what anyone else might want on any given day, I think the most important thing that we can do is figure out who we are and what we have to bring to things. And the more you can walk into rooms with that forward, I think the better you will do, and the better you'll be, better off you'll be.